I woke up before sunrise on the day of my sister's wedding, even though my alarm wasn't set to go off for another hour. That's just how it works when you're used to army schedules. Your body doesn't wait for permission. The house was quiet. My daughter was still asleep, curled up on the couch with one of her stuffed animals half hanging off the edge. I stood there for a second, just watching her breathe steady and calm like the world hadn't gotten complicated yet. I had to leave early. The venue was a little over 3 hours away just outside Nashville, and I wanted to get there before things got hectic. Not because anyone asked me to, just because that's what I've always done. Show up early, help out, stay out of the way. I moved through the kitchen on autopilot, making coffee packing snacks for the drive, checking my bag one more time. My leave had been approved 2 weeks ago after a lot of back and forth. We were short on people, and taking time off wasn't exactly convenient. But this was my sister's wedding, so I made it work. My uniform stayed in the closet. That part had been made clear. A few days earlier, my mom had called and said, "Just wear something normal. We don't need the military thing at the wedding." She didn't say it outright, but I knew what she meant. It didn't fit the aesthetic. It didn't match the photos she had in her head. So I picked out a simple navy dress instead. Nothing flashy, just clean, neat, appropriate. Safe. I poured my coffee into a travel mug and glanced at the envelope sitting on the counter. I picked it up, felt the weight of it in my hand. Inside was just under $10,000. It wasn't easy money. It was overtime shifts, skipped weekends, saying no to things I probably should have said yes to. I'd been putting it aside for almost a year. For Emily. I also had a small jewelry box tucked into my bag. A silver necklace and matching earrings I'd picked out months ago. Nothing over the top, but it fit her style. Simple, clean. I had pictured the moment in my head more times than I'd admit. She'd come over at some point during the reception, maybe after the first dance. We'd hug. I'd hand her the box. She'd smile, maybe tear up a little. Say something like, "You didn't have to do all this." And I'd just shrug it off like it was nothing. That was the plan anyway. I grabbed my keys, checked on my daughter one more time, and headed out. The drive was quiet. Long stretches of highway, early morning light coming up over the trees. The kind of calm you only get before everything starts moving. I kept thinking about the schedule. Ceremony, photos, reception. Where I'd stand. What I'd do. Where I wouldn't stand. I wasn't part of the bridal party. That had been decided early on. Emily said it would be simpler that way. I didn't push it. About halfway there, my phone buzzed through the car speakers. My mom. I answered. "Are you on the road?" she asked. "Yeah. About an hour and a half out." "Okay. When you get there, just check in with the coordinator. Don't go straight to Emily. She's already stressed." "Got it." There was a pause. "And Lauren," she added, "just try to keep things low-key today." I almost laughed, but I didn't. "I always do." "Good," she said. "We just want everything to go smoothly." We. That word again. Not us. Not the family. Just whatever version of things she had already decided on. "See you soon," I said, and ended the call. The venue came into view a little before 8. It was one of those restored historic halls. Big windows, white flowers everywhere. Staff moving quickly but quietly, like they'd done this 100 times before. I parked, grabbed my bag, and took a breath before stepping out. This was it. I walked inside and found the coordinator just like my mom had said. Introduced myself, asked what needed to be done. Within minutes, I was tying ribbons around chairs, carrying boxes, helping set up centerpieces. No one told me to do it. No one stopped me either. A few relatives I hadn't seen in years recognized me, came over, said hello. Told me I looked good. Asked how the army was treating me. Still in one of them asked, "Yeah, good for you." "That's not easy." I smiled. "You get used to it." What I didn't say was that it's easier than some other things. Around 9, I finally saw Emily. She was near the back room, surrounded by bridesmaids, already in her dress. White lace, fitted perfectly, hair done, makeup flawless. She looked exactly like what she was supposed to look like. For a second, I just stood there. She caught my eye, gave me a quick smile and a small wave. Not a hug, not even a step toward me. Just a gesture from across the room like we were acquaintances. I waved back. That was enough, I told myself. She had a lot going on. I didn't go over. My mom had been clear about that. Instead, I turned back to the tables, adjusted a few centerpieces that didn't need adjusting, straightened things that were already straight. Anything to stay useful. At one point, I stepped outside for a minute to get some air. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Mark. I almost didn't answer. We weren't close. We never had been. But I picked up anyway. "Hey, Lauren," he said, his tone casual. "You there already?" "Yeah, just got here a bit ago." Nice. "Big day?" "Yeah." There was a brief pause, like he was deciding how to say something. "Hey, random question," he went on. "That place you're living in now, that's still the house your grandparents left you, right?" I leaned against the railing. "Yeah, good area," he said. "Property values have been going up like crazy out there." I didn't respond right away. "Why?" I asked. "No reason," he said quickly. "Just curious. I've been looking at a few properties around that side of town lately, trying to get a feel for the market." "Right. You ever think about selling it?" he added like it was an afterthought. There it was. I looked out at the parking lot, watching another car pull in. "Not really," I said. "It works for us." "Yeah, sure," he said a little too fast. "Just saying, if you ever do, now's a good time. You could probably get a solid return." "I'll keep that in mind." "Yeah, do that," he replied. "All right, I won't keep you. See you inside." "See you." I ended the call and stayed there for a second longer than I needed to. It wasn't the first time someone had brought up the house like that, but something about the timing felt off. I pushed it aside. This wasn't the day to read into things. I went back inside, found my seat near the back of the room, and placed my bag carefully under the chair. I checked the envelope one more time just to make sure it was still there. It was. Everything was in place. Everything looked exactly how it was supposed to. And for a moment, standing there in that perfectly arranged room, I let myself believe that if I just kept my head down, stayed quiet, did what I always do, the day would go exactly the way it was meant to. I slid the envelope back into my bag and pushed it further under the chair with my foot, making sure it was out of sight. Something about that call didn't sit right, but I wasn't going to let it mess with my head. Not today. There were still things to do. I stood up and walked toward the front of the room where the staff was lining up chairs for the ceremony. One of them handed me a small box of programs, without even asking, like I already worked there. "Can you place these on every other seat?" she said. "Yeah," I replied, taking the box. I moved row by row, placing each program, neatly adjusting them so they all faced the same direction. It was the kind of detail most people wouldn't notice, but I did. Years of military training makes you care about alignment more than you probably should. Behind me, I could hear voices, familiar ones. My mom. She was talking to one of the coordinators, her tone sharp but controlled. "No, the centerpieces on table 7 are off. They're not matching the rest. Can you fix that before guests arrive?" "Yes, Mom," the coordinator said quickly. "And the lighting. Can we dim it just a little more near the dance floor? I don't want it looking too harsh in photos." She wasn't stressed. She was in control. "There's a difference." I finished the last row and stepped aside just as she turned around and noticed me. Her eyes scanned me quickly, head to toe. Dress, shoes, hair. A silent checklist. "Good," she said. "You look appropriate." "Not you look nice. Appropriate." "Thanks," I replied. She nodded toward the programs. "Make sure the front rows stay clear. Those are reserved." "I know." Another pause. "And Lauren," she added, lowering her voice slightly, "try not to get in the way when guests start coming in." I almost smiled at that. Wouldn't dream of it. She didn't catch the tone or chose not to. "Good," she said again, already turning back to the coordinator. That was how most of our conversations went. Short, functional, no room for anything else. I set the empty box aside and walked toward the side hallway, giving myself a minute away from the main room. A couple of bridesmaids passed by, laughing about something on their phones. One of them glanced at me, then looked away quickly, like she wasn't sure if she was supposed to acknowledge me. I kept walking. Near the entrance, I spotted my dad standing by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the parking lot. I hesitated for a second, then walked over. "Hey," I said. He turned surprised, like he hadn't expected me to be there. "Oh, hey." We stood there for a moment, both of us not entirely sure what to do with it. "You made it early," he said. "Yeah, wanted to help out." He nodded. "That's good." Another pause. I waited, thinking maybe he'd say something else. Ask how I'd been. Ask about my daughter. He didn't. Instead, he cleared his throat. "Everything looks nice." "It does." More silence. He shifted his weight slightly, then glanced toward the main room where my mom was still directing people. "She's been planning this for months," he said. "I can tell." He gave a small, almost apologetic smile, but it didn't go anywhere. "Just try to keep things smooth today, all right?" he added. There it was again. Not, "I'm glad you're here." Not, "It's good to see you." Just instructions. "I always do," I said. He nodded once, like that settled it. I looked at him for a second longer, waiting for something, anything to break through that wall he always kept up. Nothing came, so I let it go. "I'm gonna head back in," I said. "Yeah, okay." I turned and walked away, the conversation already fading behind me. Back in the main room, guests had started arriving. The energy shifted almost instantly. Voices, louder laughter filling the space. People greeting each other like they hadn't seen each other in years, which for most of them was true. I stayed near the edges, helping where I could. An older couple needed help finding their seats. A kid dropped a small box of flower petals, and I helped pick them up. Someone asked where the restrooms were. Simple things, useful things, safe things. At one point, I caught a glimpse of Emily again as she moved from one room to another, her bridesmaids trailing behind her. She looked focused, not nervous, not overwhelmed, just locked in on the day going exactly how it was planned. She didn't look my way this time. That was fine. I adjusted one of the chairs near the aisle even though it was already straight and stepped back. From where I stood, I could see the front rows filling up. Close family, friends of my parents. People who had been part of Emily's life in a way I hadn't been for a long time. My seat was further back. I didn't mind. That had been decided already. I checked my phone briefly. A message from the babysitter, everything was fine. My daughter had woken up and was eating breakfast. I typed back a quick thanks and slipped the phone into my bag. As I bent down to adjust the strap, my hand brushed against the envelope again. Still there, still unopened, still meant for a moment that hadn't happened yet. I straightened up and looked around the room. Everything was set. Every chair aligned. Every table arranged. Every detail controlled down to the smallest piece. Exactly the way my mom wanted it. Exactly the way Emily wanted it. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I had found a place where I could exist without disrupting anything. Not in the center, not in the background, just out of the way. A staff member walked past me carrying a tray of champagne glasses, the soft clink of glass against glass cutting through the noise. "Careful," someone called out. "I got it," she replied, steadying the tray. I watched her for a second, then stepped aside to give her more room, even though I was already out of the way. It had become automatic. The less space I took up, the easier everything seemed to be for everyone else. From the front of the room, the music cue started. Softly, guests began settling into their seats. The ceremony was about to begin. I moved toward my seat near the back, smoothing down my dress as I walked, making sure everything was exactly how it should be. No distractions, no issues, just one day, just one event. All I had to do was sit down, stay quiet, and let it happen the way they wanted. So I did. I folded my hands in my lap and focused on keeping my breathing steady as the music shifted and everyone turned toward the aisle. The room went quiet in that way only wedding rooms do, like someone had pressed pause on everything except what was about to happen. The doors opened. Emily stepped in. For a second, everything else disappeared. She looked exactly how she was supposed to look. Calm. Put together. Like someone who had never had to question whether she belonged in a room like this. People stood. I stood with them. From where I was near the back, I had a clear line of sight down the aisle. She walked slowly, perfectly timed to the music, her dress moving just enough with each step to catch the light from the windows. There was a moment, just one, where her eyes lifted and swept across the room. They passed right over me. No pause, no recognition, just continued forward. I sat back down with everyone else as she reached the front and the ceremony began. The officiant spoke, voice smooth and practiced. A few lines about love, commitment, building a life together. The kind of words you've heard before but still somehow land when you're in the room. I listened, but not too closely. My attention kept drifting to the way my mom sat in the front row, posture, straight hands folded neatly, watching everything like she was making sure it stayed on track. To my dad beside her, quiet expression, neutral, occasionally nodding at the right moments. To Mark standing at the front, smiling like everything in his life had lined up exactly the way he wanted. And then back to Emily. She looked happy. Not the kind of forced happy you see in photos. Real happy. And for a second I felt something close to relief. Maybe this was enough. Maybe I didn't need a big moment. Maybe just being there, seeing her like this, was enough. The vows started. Emily spoke first. Her voice was steady, confident. She talked about partnership, about building something strong, about choosing each other every day. People smiled. A few quiet laughs when she added something personal. Mark went next. Similar tone. Similar structure. A couple of jokes. A couple of emotional beats. Nothing unexpected. It was all clean. Predictable in a good way. At some point, I realized I was gripping the edge of my seat without meaning to. I loosened my hand and adjusted slightly, forcing myself to relax. This was what weddings were supposed to be: simple, happy, straightforward. When they exchanged rings, there was a soft ripple through the room. People leaning forward just a little, like they didn't want to miss anything. The officiant asked the final question. They both answered, yes. Of course they did. There was a brief pause and then, "You may kiss the bride." Applause broke out immediately, louder than it needed to be, but no one cared. That was part of it. I clapped too, maybe a little harder than I meant to. For a second, I forgot everything else. Forgot the call from my mom that morning. Forgot the way I'd been kept at a distance all day. Forgot the conversation with Mark. I just saw my sister, standing there smiling, and I let myself feel proud of her. The music picked back up as they walked back down the aisle together and everyone stood again. I stepped slightly to the side to let people pass, keeping myself out of the main flow as the room began to shift from ceremony to reception. Voices rose again. Laughter came back. The tension that had been sitting quietly in the room dissolved into movement and conversation. I stayed near the back for a moment, letting the crowd move ahead before I followed. No rush. No need to be first. By the time I reached the reception area, the staff had already reset everything. Tables filled glasses, placed servers moving between groups with trays balanced carefully in their hands. I found a spot near one of the side tables, close enough to see the dance floor, but far enough that no one would expect me to be part of anything. Someone handed me a glass of champagne as they passed by. Thanks, I said. I took a small sip and set it down on the table beside me. Across the room, Emily and Mark were making their way from table to table, greeting guests, smiling for photos, doing the rounds. My mom hovered not too far behind them, adjusting small things as she went. A chair slightly out of place. A napkin not folded the way she liked. My dad stayed near the front tables, talking with a group of relatives, nodding along to whatever story was being told. Everything looked right. That was the only word for it. Right, like all the pieces were exactly where they were supposed to be. I reached down and checked my bag again. Still there. The envelope. The jewelry box. Untouched. I pulled the strap a little closer to me, just to keep it within reach. I wasn't sure when the right moment would be, but there had to be one. There's always a moment at weddings where things slow down just enough. After the first round of greetings before the dancing really starts. A space where things aren't rushed. That's when I'd do it. I looked back towards the center of the room. Emily was laughing at something one of her friends said, her head tilted back slightly, completely at ease. She didn't look over. That was fine. I took another sip of champagne, more out of habit than anything else. The music shifted again, something softer this time, as the DJ announced the first dance. People started gathering closer to the dance floor. I stayed where I was, watching. Emily and Mark moved to the center, and the room naturally formed a circle around them. Phones came out. Conversations quieted just enough. The lights dimmed slightly, just like my mom had asked earlier. Of course they did. The song started and they began to move slow and practiced. I leaned back against the edge of the table, arms loosely crossed, just taking it in. This was her moment, not mine. I didn't need to step into it. I didn't need to interrupt anything. All I had to do was wait. Wait for the right time. Wait until things slowed down just enough. Then I'd walk over, hand her the gift, say what needed to be said, and that would be it. Simple, clean, done. I watched the way she smiled up at him as they moved, completely focused on each other, like nothing else in the room existed. And for a brief second, I let myself believe that maybe after everything we could still have a normal moment. Not a big one, just something small, something that made the rest of it feel worth it. I picked up my glass again, the condensation cool against my fingers, and glanced toward the path she'd have to take once the song ended, tracing it without thinking. If she came this way, it would be easy. No crowd, no interruption, just a quick step forward, a simple exchange. That was all it needed to be. I set the glass back down and shifted my weight slightly, making sure I wasn't blocking anyone moving past. Still out of the way, still exactly where I was supposed to be. And I stayed there watching the dance floor, waiting for that small, quiet opening where everything would finally line up the way I had planned. I straightened up as the music faded and people started clapping, watching the small crowd shift as the first dance ended. This was it, the kind of moment I had been waiting for. The room loosened. People stepped back. Conversations started again. The circle around the dance floor broke apart just enough for movement. Emily stepped away from Mark, laughing, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, as one of her friends pulled her into a quick hug. I reached down, grabbed my bag, and slipped the strap over my shoulder. Nothing dramatic, just one step forward, then another. I didn't rush. I didn't hesitate. I moved toward her the same way I'd been moving all day. Quiet, careful, making sure I didn't interrupt anything. For a second, it actually felt normal, like I was just walking over to my sister. Like everything else I'd been overthinking didn't matter. She turned slightly, her eyes scanning the room, and then they landed on me. There was a shift, small but noticeable. The smile didn't disappear. It just changed. Tighter. Controlled. I slowed down a little, adjusting my grip on the bag, already reaching for the moment I had imagined all morning. But she didn't step toward me. She didn't open her arms. She just stood there. And then she walked forward. Not toward me. Past me. Close enough that I could smell her perfume, but not close enough to touch. I turned slightly, caught off guard, watching her move toward the far side of the room. Maybe she didn't see me clearly. Maybe she was just being pulled somewhere else. That happens at weddings. I told myself that. I stayed where I was for a second, then took another step, adjusting my direction to follow the path she'd taken. That's when my mom appeared. Not from the front, from the side, like she had been watching the whole thing and stepped in at exactly the right moment. Lauren. Her voice was low, but it cut through everything. I stopped. She stood close enough that no one else would hear unless they were paying attention. Her expression was calm. Too calm. You need to leave. No build-up, no explanation. Just that. I blinked once, thinking I had misheard. Sorry, you heard me? She said, her tone tightening just enough. You need to go. I glanced past her, instinctively looking for Emily. She was a few steps away now, talking to someone else, not looking in our direction. She doesn't want you here, my mom added. That landed harder than the first part. For a second, everything around me kept moving like nothing had changed. Music playing, glasses clinking, people laughing. But it all felt muted, distant. I'm just going to give her the gift, I said, keeping my voice even. I shifted the bag slightly, just enough to make the point. My mom's eyes flicked down to it, then back up to me. Her jaw tightened. No, she said. That's not necessary. Not necessary. I held her gaze for a second longer, waiting for anything to soften. It didn't. Behind her, Emily finally looked over. Our eyes met. This time she didn't look away. She walked over slowly, stopping just a few steps behind my mom. Close enough to hear everything, not close enough to interrupt. Emily. I said, my voice quieter now. You need to leave. She said it without raising her voice, without hesitation, like she had already said it in her head 10 times before I got there. I felt my grip tighten around the strap of my bag. Why, I asked. Simple question. Fair question. Her expression didn't change. You're making people uncomfortable. I almost laughed. By standing here, it's not just that, she said. It's the whole situation. The whole situation. I waited. If there was more, this was the moment she would say it. She didn't. My mom stepped in again, her voice dropping even lower. You're bad luck here, Lauren. There it was. Clear, direct, final. I stared at her. For a second, I thought maybe she'd take it back. Realize how it sounded. She didn't. This is her day, she continued. We're not going to have anything negative around. Negative. That's what I was. I looked at Emily again. She didn't disagree. She didn't defend me. She just stood there, arms folded lightly in front of her, waiting for me to accept it. Behind them, my dad had turned slightly, his attention caught just enough to notice something was happening. He looked over. Our eyes met for a brief second. I held it. He hesitated. Then he looked away. That was it. No one said anything else. No one needed to. I felt the heat rise in my face, sharp and immediate. But everything else inside me went quiet. No anger, no argument, just clarity. I let out a small breath, barely noticeable. Okay, I said. One word. My mom nodded once, like that was the correct response. Emily relaxed slightly, like something had just been resolved. I reached down, set my champagne glass on the nearest table, careful not to make a sound. Then I adjusted the strap of my bag on my shoulder, still holding it, still holding everything I had brought for her. No one stopped me. No one apologized. No one said anything as I turned and walked toward the exit. My heels clicked against the floor, steady, measured. Not fast, not slow, just controlled. I passed tables filled with people who didn't notice, or noticed and chose not to. I passed the photographer who looked confused for a second before turning back to his camera. I passed the entrance where guests were still arriving, stepping around me without a second thought. By the time I reached the doors, the music had already picked back up behind me. Like nothing had happened. I pushed the door open and stepped outside into the late afternoon light. The air felt different out there. Quieter, cooler, real. I walked straight to my car without stopping my steps. Automatic. My mind catching up somewhere behind me. It wasn't until I opened the door and sat down in the driver's seat that I finally let myself look down. The bag was still on my shoulder. I pulled it into my lap and opened it. The envelope was still there, untouched. The jewelry box still closed, exactly the way it had been that morning. I stared at it for a second longer than I needed to, then closed the bag and set it on the passenger seat. My hands were steady when I reached for the keys. That surprised me more than anything else. I started the engine, the low hum filling the silence. For a moment, I just sat there looking straight ahead at nothing in particular. Then I shifted into drive and pulled out of the parking lot, the venue disappearing in the rearview mirror without me looking back. I gripped the steering wheel tighter than I needed to as I merged onto the highway, the road stretching out in front of me like it always did, flat, predictable, easy. My vision wasn't. I blinked hard a few times trying to clear it, but it didn't help much. Everything felt just slightly off, like I was a second behind my own reactions. Cold air helped. Focus helped. That's what you learn. You don't fix the situation. You fix yourself enough to get through it. The car picked up speed. The venue was gone now. Just trees, open road, and the occasional car passing by like none of this mattered. I kept both hands on the wheel. 10 and 2, automatic. There was a moment maybe 10 minutes into the drive where my chest tightened out of nowhere. Not sharp pain, just pressure, like something was building up with nowhere to go. I exhaled slowly, trying to push it down. Didn't work. Another mile, another turn, and then it hit. Not gradual, not controlled. It just broke through. I pulled the car over to the shoulder without thinking too much about it, tires crunching lightly against the gravel as I stopped. The engine stayed on. The air kept blowing, but everything inside the car felt different, quieter. I leaned forward, elbows resting on the steering wheel, head down for a second. And then I laughed. One short, dry laugh. Because of course that's how it went. I had driven 3 hours, took leave I had to fight for, showed up early, helped set up, stayed out of the way, did everything right, and still ended up walking out with a bag I never got to open. I let out another breath, but this one didn't stay steady. My hands started shaking, not enough to lose control, just enough that I noticed. I pressed them flat against the wheel, trying to hold them still. It didn't help. Bad luck. I said it out loud this time, like maybe hearing it would make it make more sense. It didn't. I sat there for a while, not checking the time, not looking at my phone, just letting everything settle enough that I could think straight again. This wasn't the first bad day I'd had. Not even close. I'd been through worse. That's what I told myself. Deployment in Kuwait had its moments. Long hours heat that didn't let up decisions that actually mattered. You get used to pressure when it comes with a purpose. This didn't have one. This was just personal. And that made it worse. I leaned back in the seat and stared up through the windshield at the sky, letting the air hit my face until my breathing evened out again. Eventually, the shaking stopped. Not because I felt better, just because I had control again. That was enough. I reached over, grabbed my bag, and pulled the envelope out. It felt heavier now. Not physically, just different. I turned it over in my hands, running my thumb along the edge. $10,000. I thought about all the hours behind it. Extra shifts, late nights, saying no to things my daughter had asked for because I had a plan, because I wanted to do something right, something that meant something. I let out a slow breath and slid it back into the bag. Not today. I adjusted in my seat, checked my mirrors, and pulled back onto the road. The rest of the drive was quieter, not because there was less noise, because I had stopped expecting anything. That made things easier. When I got closer to home, the streets started to look familiar again. The same gas station on the corner. The same small grocery store I stopped at more often than I wanted to admit. Normal things. Predictable things. I pulled into my driveway just as the sun started to drop lower in the sky. The house looked exactly the same as it had that morning. Nothing had changed. I sat in the car for a second before turning off the engine. Silence again. Real silence this time. No music. No voices. No background noise. Just me. I grabbed my bag, stepped out, and walked up to the front door. Unlocked it. Stepped inside. The air felt still. Calm. Safe. My daughter's shoes were by the door, one tipped over like she had kicked them off in a hurry earlier. A small toy was on the floor near the couch. Everything exactly where it should be. I set my bag down on the kitchen counter and moved through the house slowly, almost like I was checking that everything was still real. Kitchen, living room, hallway, nothing out of place. I leaned against the counter for a second, hands resting flat against the surface. This house. It wasn't just a house. It was the only thing that had ever been given to me without conditions. My grandparents had made sure of that. They didn't say much when they were alive, but they paid attention. They saw things my parents pretended not to. When they passed, the will had been clear. The house was mine. Not shared. Not divided. Mine. I remembered sitting in that lawyer's office hearing it read out loud. The silence in the room had felt different then. Tighter. Like something had shifted. My mom hadn't said anything at first. My dad had just sat there. Emily had looked at me like I had taken something that belonged to her. Even then, even before today, it had never really sat right with them. I pushed myself off the counter and walked over to the living room, lowering myself onto the couch. The cushion dipped slightly under my weight. I stared straight ahead for a second, not really focusing on anything. Then I reached for my phone. No missed calls. No messages. Nothing. I set it back down on the table. Of course. Why would there be? There was nothing left to say. I leaned back, resting my head against the couch, and closed my eyes for just a second. Not to sleep. Just to stop thinking. But that didn't last long. Because the second everything got quiet, one thought pushed through clear and sharp. They didn't throw me out because of bad luck. They threw me out because I didn't matter. Not without something attached to it. Not without something they could use. I opened my eyes again and stared at the ceiling, letting that thought sit exactly where it landed. And for the first time since I had left the venue, something inside me shifted. Not louder, not bigger, just different. I pushed myself up from the couch and walked over to the wall where the framed photos hung, stopping right in front of the one I always avoided looking at too long. My grandparents. It was an old photo. Nothing fancy. Just the two of them sitting side by side on their porch. Both of them looking straight at the camera, like they didn't have anything to prove. I stood there for a minute, then another. They were the only ones in this family who never made me feel like I had to earn my place. When I was a kid, I didn't have the words for it. I just knew things felt different around them. Quieter. Easier. At home, everything had a weight to it. Emily got new clothes first. Emily got signed up for dance classes, piano lessons, anything she showed even a little interest in. I got what was left over, and that wasn't even the part that stuck with me. It was how normal it all seemed to everyone else. If I said something, it turned into me being difficult. If I didn't say anything, it meant I understood. So I learned early. Keep things simple. Don't push. Stay out of the way. My grandparents never said anything directly about it, but they saw it. I knew they did. When I stayed over at their house, things were even. Same food, same attention, same rules, no comparisons, no reminders of what I wasn't. When I got older and decided to join the army, my mom didn't argue much. She just said, if that's what you want. Emily got a small celebration when she picked her college. I packed my things quietly and left. My grandparents were the only ones who showed up to see me off. My grandfather shook my hand like I was already someone he respected. My grandmother hugged me a little longer than usual. Take care of yourself, she said. They called, checked in, asked how I was doing. Not what I was doing for anyone else, just me. When my husband died, they were the first ones at my door. Before my parents, before anyone else. They didn't try to fix anything. They just stayed. That mattered more than anything anyone could have said. I reached up and adjusted the frame slightly, even though it didn't need it. After they passed, everything changed again. Not all at once. Just enough that you noticed it if you were paying attention. The lawyer's office was small. Too small for the number of people in it. My mom sat straight, hands folded, like she already knew how everything was supposed to go. My dad stayed quiet like always. Emily looked impatient, like this was just something to get through. The lawyer read through the will carefully, line by line. No surprises at first. A few accounts, some personal items, nothing unusual. Then he got to the house. The property located at, he read the address out loud, then paused just slightly. Is to be transferred in full ownership to Lauren Hayes. The room shifted, not loudly, but enough. My mom didn't react right away. Emily did. She leaned forward slightly. Wait, what? The lawyer didn't look up. As stated, the property will be transferred to Lauren. This decision has been documented and finalized. Emily looked at my mom. My mom's expression stayed controlled, too controlled. There must be some mistake, she said. There is no mistake, the lawyer replied. Silence. Then my dad spoke for the first time. That house that was supposed to stay in the family. It is staying in the family, the lawyer said. It's being transferred to your daughter. That didn't land the way it should have. Emily leaned back in her chair, arms crossing. That doesn't make sense, she said. Why would they give it all to her? No one answered that, because the answer was obvious. My grandparents knew exactly what they were doing. The lawyer continued. There is an additional clause, he said, flipping a page. Both parents have previously signed acknowledgement of this decision and agreed not to contest the will. He slid a document across the table. My mom didn't touch it. My dad glanced at it, then looked away. They had signed it. I remembered that now. Months before my grandparents passed, there had been a dinner. A quiet one. Nothing dramatic. Just paperwork brought out at the end. Just to make sure everything's clear, my grandfather had said. No one argued then. No one wanted to make a scene. Not in front of him. Now sitting in that office, they didn't have that option anymore. Emily's eyes shifted toward me. Not angry. Not yet. Just calculating. Like something had changed in how she saw me. Not as her sister. As someone holding something she didn't have. The rest of the meeting went by without much else being said. Papers were signed. Details were finalized. And just like that, the house became mine. Official. Legal. Done. I didn't celebrate. I didn't say much. I just went home. That was years ago. And even after that, things stayed mostly quiet on the surface. No direct arguments. No open conflict. Just small comments. Subtle ones. That house is a lot for one person. You ever think about downsizing? You could probably sell and get something easier to manage, always framed as concern, never as what it actually was. Interest. I stepped back from the photo and walked over to the kitchen, grabbing a glass and filling it with water. Took a sip. Set it down. That conversation with Mark earlier that morning replayed in my head. The timing, the way he asked. Casual on the surface. Too casual. You ever think about selling it? I leaned against the counter again, arms crossed now. This wasn't new. I just hadn't put it together before. Or maybe I had. And chose not to look too closely. Because it was easier that way. Easier to believe that whatever distance existed between us was just personality, not intention. But today had changed that. Being called bad luck didn't come out of nowhere. Neither did being asked to leave. And neither did that call that hadn't happened yet. But somehow already felt like it was coming. I looked around the kitchen, letting my eyes land on small things. The cabinet I fixed last year. The table my daughter drew on with a marker I never fully cleaned off. The fridge with a couple of her drawings held up by magnets. This wasn't just a house. It was where everything I had left was. And for the first time, I didn't just see what it meant to me. I saw what it meant to them. And that was a completely different thing. My phone lit up on the kitchen counter just as I reached for my coffee. I didn't pick it up right away. I just stood there looking at the screen. Emily, of course. I let it ring once more, then answered. Hey, I said. Her voice came through light. Almost cheerful. Hey, did you make it home okay? That threw me off for half a second. Yeah, I said. I'm home. Good, she replied. I figured you left early. It got kind of busy after. Kind of busy. That's one way to put it. I didn't respond. There was a small pause, just enough to feel intentional. Then she moved on. So quick thing, she said, her tone shifting just slightly. Can you send me the paperwork for your house? Mark needs it. Just like that. No apology. No acknowledgement. No mention of what happened the day before. I leaned back against the counter, my free hand resting flat against the surface. What do you need it for? I asked. She exhaled like I was already making this more complicated than it needed to be. Well, you know the house is pretty big, she said. And it's just you and your kid. It doesn't really make sense for you to be there long term. I didn't say anything. She kept going. Mark's been looking at the numbers, she added. We could probably sell it, split things in a way that works, and you could get something smaller. Easier to manage. Split things. I let that sit for a second. Split with who I asked. There was another pause. Then she said it like it was obvious. With family. Family. I looked down at my coffee still untouched. You mean you and Mark, I said. Her tone sharpened just a little. I mean all of us, she replied. This isn't just about you. I almost smiled. Of course it wasn't. I shifted the phone slightly against my ear, glancing toward the hallway where my daughter's room was. Still quiet. Still sleeping. Emily, I said, keeping my voice steady. That house is mine, she sighed. Technically, yeah, she said. But you didn't even pay for it. Grandma and Grandpa gave it to you. There it was. Not said with anger. Just stated, like a fact. And they chose to give it to me, I replied. That doesn't mean you keep all of it, she shot back. That's not how family works. I let out a small breath through my nose. I had heard versions of this before, just never this direct. Before I could respond, another voice cut in. My mom, Lauren. She said, not even bothering with a greeting. Don't make this difficult. I closed my eyes for a second. Of course she was on the call. We're not asking for anything unreasonable, she continued. You have more than you need. Your sister is starting her life. You should be helping her. Helping her. I leaned my head back slightly, staring up at the ceiling. I showed up yesterday, I said. That was me helping. Silence. Short. Tight. Then my mom spoke again, her tone cooler now. That's not what we're talking about. No, I said quietly. It isn't. I could hear movement on the other end. Maybe Emily shifting the phone, maybe Mark in the background. And then, like he had been waiting for his turn, Mark's voice came through. Lauren. This is a smart move, he said. I'm telling you as someone who works in this, your place is sitting on a lot of value right now. We could liquidate, reinvest, set everyone up better. Everyone. I pushed myself off the counter and walked slowly toward the window, looking out at the driveway. I'm not selling my house, I said. There was no hesitation in it, no room left for negotiation. Another pause, longer this time. Then Emily, again, her voice no longer light. So you're just going to keep everything for yourself? She asked. That's not what I said. That's exactly what you're doing. I shook my head slightly, even though she couldn't see it. I'm keeping what was given to me, I replied. My mom cut in again, sharper now. You're being selfish. There it was. Simple, clean, familiar. I rested my hand against the glass of the window, feeling the cool surface under my fingers. Yesterday I said slowly, you told me I was bad luck. No one answered. You told me to leave, I added. Still nothing. And today you're asking me for my house. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The silence on the other end stretched out just enough to feel uncomfortable. Then my dad spoke. First time. His voice was lower, controlled. You need to think about what's fair, he said. I closed my eyes for a second. There it was again. Fair, not right, not wrong. Fair, for who I asked. He didn't answer that. Instead, he said, we're trying to keep things balanced. Balanced. I let out a quiet breath. Nothing about this was balanced. Lauren, Emily said, her voice tight now. Just send the paperwork. We'll handle the rest. Handle the rest. Like I wasn't even part of the decision. Like it was already done. I looked out at the driveway again, the same empty space I had pulled into less than 12 hours earlier. Everything had felt different then. Not anymore. No, I said. The word landed heavier than I expected. No explanation. No justification. Just no. For a second there was nothing. Then everything at once. Emily's voice rose first. What do you mean, no? My mom right behind her. Lauren, don't start this. Mark louder now. You don't understand how this works. And then my dad cutting through all of it. Enough. The line went quiet again. Think about what you're doing, he said slower this time. Don't make a decision you're going to regret. I tightened my grip on the phone just slightly. I already have, I replied. Another pause. This one felt different. Heavier. Not confusion. Not frustration. Something closer to realization. Like they were all hearing it at the same time. I didn't need to say anything else. I didn't need to argue. Because for the first time in that entire conversation, I wasn't trying to explain myself. I was just done. I lowered the phone slightly but didn't hang up, listening to the silence stretch just long enough for someone to break it. My mom did. You're overreacting, she said, her tone clipped now. This is exactly why we didn't want you causing issues yesterday. I let that sit there. Causing issues? That's what you think happened, I asked. That's what happened, she replied without hesitation. You showed up with energy that didn't fit the day. Energy. I almost laughed again. Right, I said quietly. Emily jumped back in, her voice sharper now, no effort to soften it anymore. This isn't about yesterday, she said. Stop trying to make it about that. No one else is bringing it up, my mom added quickly. You are. I shifted my weight, leaning against the wall, now my eyes moving down the hallway again. Still quiet. Still safe. For you, maybe, I said. It's not about yesterday. Then don't make it one, Emily snapped. Just send the paperwork and let's move on. Move on. Like this was a small thing. Like it didn't matter. I pressed my lips together for a second before speaking. You want me to sign over my house, I said. And you think we just move on from that? That's not what we said, Mark cut in quickly. We're talking about restructuring assets. You'd still benefit from the sale. Restructuring assets. That sounded a lot better than what it actually was. By losing my house, I said, you'd gain liquidity, he replied like he was explaining something obvious. I stared at the floor for a second, then back up. You've thought this through, I said. Of course I have, he answered. This is what I do. That part I believed. Too easily. My mom stepped back in. You're focusing on the wrong thing, she said. Your sister needs help right now. With what I asked. There was a brief pause. Emily answered this time. I have debt, she said, her voice tight but controlled. And we're trying to start something new. a business. This would give us a clean start. A clean start, at my expense. And that's my responsibility, I asked. You're part of this family, my mom said immediately. There it was again. That word, family. I let out a slow breath. Yesterday I said I wasn't. No one responded to that, because there wasn't anything to say. You're twisting things, my mom said finally. That situation was different. How, I asked. Silence. Then she said, "This is about doing what's right." I nodded slightly even though she couldn't see it. "That's exactly what I'm doing," I said. Emily's patience snapped. "No, you're not," she said, her voice rising. "You're being selfish. You always do this. You act like you're the only one who's been through anything." That landed differently. Not because it was new, because it wasn't. "I didn't say that," I replied. "You don't have to," she shot back. "It's always there." I shook my head slowly. "This isn't about what I've been through," I said. "This is about what you're asking. And what we're asking is reasonable," my mom insisted. "You have more than you need." I looked around the kitchen again, the table, the chairs, the small marks on the wall from where my daughter had pushed a toy too hard. More than I need. I tightened my grip on the phone just slightly. "You don't get to decide that," I said. That shifted something. I could hear it. A change in tone. A change in approach. My dad spoke again, slower this time. "Lauren," he said, "no one is trying to take anything from you." I didn't respond right away, because that wasn't true. "Then why do you need the paperwork?" I asked. Another pause. Longer. Then Mark answered. "It's just easier if we handle the process," he said. "Less complicated for everyone." Everyone. I nodded once. "Of course it is," I said. Emily let out a frustrated breath. "Why are you making this so hard?" she asked. "We're not asking for everything. We're asking you to help." I leaned my head back slightly, closing my eyes for just a second. Help. That word again. "When was the last time you helped me?" I asked. Silence. No quick answer this time. No prepared response. Just quiet. That said more than anything else. My mom broke it first. "That's not fair," she said. "No," I replied. "It's accurate." I opened my eyes again and pushed myself off the wall, walking slowly back toward the kitchen counter. The phone felt heavier now, not because of the weight, because of what was sitting on the other end of it. "We're trying to keep this civil," my dad said, his voice firmer now. "But if you're going to refuse to cooperate, this could turn into something else." There it was. Not loud, not aggressive, but clear. A line. I stopped walking. "What does that mean?" I asked. Another pause. Then he said it. "We can take this to court." Simple. Direct. Like it was just another option on the table. I let that sit there for a second. Then I nodded. "Go ahead," I said. That wasn't the response they expected. I could hear it immediately. The shift. Emily's voice came back first, sharper now. "You think you're untouchable because of some paperwork," she said. "It's not some paperwork," I replied. "It's a legal will." "That doesn't mean we can't challenge it," Mark added quickly. I almost smiled. "You can try," I said. That didn't calm anything down. If anything, it pushed things further. Voices overlapping again. Frustration building. Pressure rising. But none of it landed the way it had before, because something had already changed. I wasn't trying to convince them anymore. I wasn't trying to fix anything. I wasn't trying to keep the peace. I listened for a few more seconds, letting them talk over each other, repeating the same points in slightly different ways. Then I pulled the phone away from my ear just enough to look at the screen. Still connected. Still active. I brought it back. "Listen," I said, cutting through the noise just enough to be heard. Everything quieted slightly. "I'm not sending you anything," I continued. "Not today. Not later. No explanation. No justification. Just a statement." The silence that followed was different. Not confused. Not frustrated. Cold. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. They weren't going to stop. I ended the call without saying anything else and set the phone down on the counter like it had nothing left to offer me. The house was quiet again. Not tense, not heavy, just quiet. I stood there for a second, hands resting on the counter, letting everything settle into place. Not the emotions. Those had already done what they were going to do. This was different, clearer, more like a decision than a reaction. From down the hallway, I heard a small sound movement, then the soft shuffle of feet. My daughter. She walked into the kitchen, rubbing one eye. Her hair still messy from sleep, holding onto the sleeve of her shirt like she always did when she was half awake. "Hey," I said, my voice softer without thinking about it. "Hi," she mumbled. She climbed up onto one of the kitchen chairs and looked at me for a second, really looked. Kids do that. They don't miss much. "You came back early," she said. Yeah. Did you see Aunt Emily? I did. She nodded slowly like she was putting pieces together in her head. Then she asked it. Simple. Direct. Why doesn't Grandma like us? I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know what to say. Because I knew exactly what I couldn't say. I pulled out the chair next to her and sat down. That's not about you, I said. She looked at me, waiting. Then why, she asked. I exhaled slowly. Sometimes people don't know how to treat others the right way, I said. Even if they're supposed to. She thought about that. Kids always do. They don't just accept answers. They test them. Did we do something wrong? She asked. That one landed harder than anything from the phone call. No, I said immediately. You didn't do anything wrong? She nodded, but I could see it wasn't fully enough. It didn't need to be. She slid off the chair and walked over to the fridge, pulling it open and grabbing a juice box. Normal. Routine. She stuck the straw in and took a sip, then looked back at me. Are we still going to live here? She asked. I followed her gaze around the kitchen, the cabinets, the table, the walls, everything she knew, everything that felt permanent to her. Yeah, I said. We are. She nodded again, satisfied this time, and walked out of the room like the question had been simple. For her it was. For me it wasn't anymore. I stayed at the table for a few seconds after she left, staring at nothing in particular. Then I stood up. Enough thinking. This wasn't something that needed more time. It needed a plan. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Legal assistance on base. I hit call. It rang twice before someone picked up. Legal office. Hi, this is Captain Lauren Hayes. I have a question about property and family disputes. There was a brief pause, then the tone shifted slightly more formal. Yes, Mom. What can we help you with? I kept it simple. I have full ownership of a property that was transferred through a will, I said. Family members are now trying to pressure me into transferring it to them. I want to understand my options and protections. Another pause, typing in the background. Do you have documentation confirming ownership? The voice asked. Yes. And was the will legally executed? Yes. Then they have no automatic claim to the property, the voice said. If ownership is clear and uncontested at the time of transfer, it's yours. I leaned against the counter slightly. Even if they try to take legal action, I asked. They can attempt to file a claim, the voice replied, but that doesn't mean it has merit. You would need to consult a civilian attorney for full representation. But based on what you're describing, your position is strong. Strong. I nodded slightly. Understood, I said. If there's any concern about harassment or coercion, the voice added, document everything. Keep records of communication. I will. Anything else we can help with? No, that covers it. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. The line clicked off. I lowered the phone slowly. That was the first step. Confirmation. Now I needed the next one. I scrolled again. Different number this time. Margaret Hayes. The attorney who had handled my grandparents' will. I hadn't spoken to her in a while, but I knew she'd remember me. She picked up on the third ring. Margaret Hayes. Hi, this is Lauren Hayes, I said. You handled my grandparents' estate a few years ago. A brief pause, then recognition. Lauren, yes, of course, how are you? I need to talk to you about the house, I said. Her tone shifted immediately. All right, she replied. What's going on? I told her. Not every detail. Just the parts that mattered. The will, the ownership, the pressure from my family, the request for paperwork, the mention of selling. She didn't interrupt, didn't react, just listened. When I finished, there was a short pause. Then she spoke. Legally, they don't have a claim, she said. You own the property outright. That hasn't changed. I figured, I said. But she continued. That doesn't mean they'll stop trying. No, it didn't. What are my options? I asked. There was a small shuffle of papers on her end. Well, she said you can do nothing and maintain ownership as is. But that leaves you open to continued pressure. Calls potential claims, even if they don't hold up. I leaned my shoulder against the wall. That's not ideal, I said. No, she agreed. It isn't. Another pause. Then she added, there is another option. I waited. You could transfer the property into a trust, she said. Specifically, a charitable trust. I straightened slightly. Explain that. You would no longer personally own the house, she said. The trust would. You could structure it so you retain lifetime residency. You and your daughter could live there indefinitely, and they couldn't touch it, I asked. Not if it's properly set up, she replied. It removes the asset from your personal ownership. There's nothing for them to claim against. I let that sink in. There was a catch. There's always a catch. What's the downside? I asked. You give up control over selling it in the future, she said. You're essentially locking it in. It becomes part of the trust's purpose. I nodded slowly. There it was. A trade. Peace for control. Silence for flexibility. Can we structure it for something specific? I asked. Yes, she said. It can be tied to a cause. Housing support community programs. Anything that aligns with your intent. I looked down at the floor for a second, then back up. Military families. Single parents. People who didn't have backup plans. People who had to make decisions without a safety net. That works, I said. Then we can set up a meeting, she replied. I'll prepare the documents. When's the soonest? I asked. Tomorrow, she said. I didn't hesitate. I'll be there. We ended the call. I set the phone down again, this time with more intention. The kitchen felt the same. The house felt the same. Nothing had changed. Except now there was a direction. Not emotional, not reactive. Just clear. I walked over to the sink, rinsed out my coffee mug, and set it aside. Then I stood there for a second, looking out the window again. The driveway. The quiet street. Everything exactly where it had been. Only now I wasn't standing there trying to understand what had happened. I was deciding what I was going to do about it. I parked outside Margaret's office the next morning and sat in the car for a few seconds before getting out, going over everything one more time in my head. Not the emotions. Those were already handled. Just the steps. Walk in. Review documents. Ask questions. Sign. Simple. Controlled. Inside the office looked exactly the same as I remembered. Clean, quiet. The kind of place where everything is intentional. Margaret stood when I walked in, offering a small professional smile. Good to see you again, Lauren. Thanks for seeing me on short notice. Of course, she said, gesturing toward the chair across from her desk. Let's get right into it. That was one of the reasons I trusted her. No unnecessary conversation. No filler. She slid a folder across the desk. I've prepared a draft of the trust structure, she said. Take your time and read through it. I opened it and started scanning. It was all there. Transfer of ownership from me to the trust. Designation of purpose housing support for single mothers and military families. Lifetime residency clause. Clear. Direct. Final. Once this is signed and filed, Margaret continued, the property is no longer yours in a personal capacity. It belongs to the trust. And no one can force a sale, I asked. No, she said. Not you. Not your family. Not anyone outside the trust's terms. I nodded. That was the point. That also means, she added, if you ever decide you want to sell it, you can't. That option is gone. I looked back down at the document. I already knew that. But hearing it again made it real. I thought about the house. Not as an asset. As a place. My daughter running through the hallway. Her drawings on the fridge. The quiet mornings. The routine. Then I thought about the alternative. Constant calls. Pressure. Arguments that never actually end. Always having to defend something that was already mine. That wasn't sustainable. This is the right move, I said. Margaret nodded once. I agree. She turned the document slightly and pointed to the signature line. Whenever you're ready. I picked up the pen. No hesitation. No second guessing. I signed. Once. Then again where it was needed. Margaret collected the papers, reviewed them quickly, then set them aside. I'll have these filed today, she said. You'll get confirmation once everything is processed. That's it, I asked. That's it, she replied. Simple. Clean. Done. I stood up, thanked her, and walked out of the office feeling lighter than I expected. Not relieved. Just settled. Back in the car, I didn't start the engine right away. I reached for my phone, scrolled to Emily's name, paused for half a second, then hit call. She picked up almost immediately. Did you think about what we talked about? She asked. No greeting, no build-up. Yeah, I said. Good, she replied. So just send? You don't need the paperwork anymore. Silence. Not long. Just enough. What does that mean? She asked. It means the house isn't mine anymore, I said. Another pause. Longer this time. Then what are you talking about? I leaned back slightly in the seat, my tone steady. I transferred it into a trust this morning. The reaction was immediate. What, she snapped. Why would you do that? So no one can sell it, I said. Her voice rose. You're joking. I'm not. I could hear movement on her end. Voices in the background. Mark. My mom. She hadn't called alone. Of course she hadn't. You can't just do that. Mark's voice cut in. That's not how this works. It's exactly how it works, I replied. You just gave up your own asset, he said. Do you even understand what you did? Yes, I said. Emily jumped back in louder now. Fix it, she said. Call your lawyer and fix it right now. No. One word. Flat. Final. That only made it worse. My mom's voice came through next, sharp and controlled in that way that always meant she was angry. "Lauren, you've gone too far," she said. "This is embarrassing." Embarrassing? I almost smiled. For who, I asked. For this family, she snapped. "Do you have any idea how this looks?" I looked out through the windshield, watching a car pass by in the distance. "I'm not worried about how it looks," I said. "You should be," she replied. "People are going to ask questions, then answer them." That didn't land well. I could hear her breathing on the other end, trying to hold on to control. My dad's voice followed, lower but just as firm. "You can't make decisions like this without thinking about the consequences." "I did think about it," I said. And he asked. "And I'm fine with them." That was the moment everything shifted. Not the anger. That was already there. Something else. The realization that this wasn't something they could push through. Emily's voice came back louder now, breaking through everything else. "You did this on purpose," she said. "You knew we needed that house." There it was. Not we wanted. Not we hoped. Needed. "I know what you wanted," I replied. "You don't get to decide that," she shot back. I already did. Another wave of overlapping voices. Frustration. Anger. Disbelief. None of it landed. Because there was nothing left for them to take. "You're ruining everything," my mom said. "No," I replied. "I'm protecting what's mine." "It's not yours anymore," Mark snapped. Exactly. That stopped him. Just for a second. Just long enough. Emily tried again, her voice tight now. "You can undo this," she said. "Call your lawyer and reverse it." "I can't," I said. "Why not?" "Because it's already done." Silence. Real silence this time. No immediate response. No quick comeback. Just quiet. And in that quiet, everything that needed to be understood was understood. "You've made a mistake," my dad said finally. "Maybe," I replied. "But it's mine to make." I didn't wait for a response. I ended the call, set the phone down, and for the first time since the day before, the silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt clear. I sat there for a moment longer, then opened my contacts again. One by one. Emily. Blocked. Mark. Blocked. My mom. Blocked. I paused on my dad's name for a second, then did the same. The screen went still. No notifications. No incoming calls. Nothing. I placed the phone face down on the passenger seat and finally started the engine. The drive home felt different. Same roads. Same turns. But without that constant pull in the background. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked exactly the same as it had every other day. No change. No sign of what had just happened. I stepped out, walked up to the door, and let myself in. My daughter was in the living room, sitting on the floor with her toys spread out in front of her. She looked up when she heard me. "Hey," she said. "Hey." I set my keys down and walked over, lowering myself onto the floor next to her. "What are you building?" I asked. "A house," she said, holding up one of the pieces. I nodded, picking up another piece and handing it to her. "Looks solid." She smiled and kept going, completely focused on what she was doing. I sat there with her, not saying much, just watching her put things together piece by piece. No rush. No pressure. Just steady. After a while, I leaned back slightly, resting my hands on the floor behind me, looking around the room. The walls. The furniture. Everything familiar. Everything still here. And for the first time in a long time, there wasn't anything attached to it. No expectation. No obligation. No one else trying to claim it. Just space. Just quiet. Just ours. I didn't lose a family that day. I finally saw it clearly. There's a difference. For a long time, I thought being patient, staying quiet, and doing the right thing would eventually fix things. That if I just showed up enough, gave enough, and didn't make problems, it would come back to me in some way. It doesn't work like that. Some people don't change. They just get more comfortable asking for more. And at some point, you either keep giving or you decide you're done. That was the line for me. Not the wedding, not the words. It was the moment I realized they didn't want me there without something to take. So I stopped offering it. Not with anger, not with noise, just with a decision. If you've ever dealt with family drama like this, where love feels conditional, where respect depends on what you can give, then you already know how heavy that gets. And maybe you've been told to just let it go or keep the peace. But peace doesn't come from giving everything away. Sometimes it comes from drawing a line and not moving it. If this story felt real to you, if you've lived through something similar, or you just enjoy real grounded family revenge stories like this, make sure you subscribe. There's more coming.